my name is Larissa. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to make our own DIY Galadriel doll. Now I love this original 2004 Barbie Lord of the Rings Galadriel doll, but it's still worth hundreds of dollars that I do not have. So I thought it'd be fun to make my own. So inspired by Galadriel, Lady of Light, Kate Blanchett playing her in the Lord of the Rings movies, I will be making my own. She has many versions of her outfits throughout the movies and now the show, but the specific outfit, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, where she looks into the water to look at the visions of the future for Frodo, was my favorite. So that will be the inspiration for today. So using a base doll that is thrifted and well loved by its previous child owner, I'm going to be using this Bratzilla's doll. She originally had all these accessories and cute outfit pieces, but all she has left is her shirt, and her poor hair is pretty gross. We won't be needing it anyway, so we're going to be cutting it off and making her some new hair for her new Galadriel look. She's probably pretty dirty, so I'm going to be cleaning her today with some diluted warm water toothbrush solution here and lightly brushing off any residue on the doll. Now this makeup, although it's beautiful, doesn't work for Galadriel, so I'll be removing the original factory makeup using acetone, some cotton pads here, and some Q-tips to be getting the tattoo off her arm and the makeup off her face. Now this was a very long process because it just very slowly came off, and not all of it came off, but enough where I could paint it later and make her makeup look more like Galadriel. So I'll be using this air dry clay. It is terracotta colored, so I'm going to be covering her face to protect her while I'm be making her ears using a reference from the movie here, and some various clay tools that I have. Additionally, I'll be using this air clay to seal off her hips because her hips are very loose. I'm sure there's some kind of elastic or something that is in her legs, but they are very loose, and I won't be posing her anyways, so there's no point. So I'll be sealing those off as well. Now, while those were drying, I used this finishing spray. I did not use Mr. Clear. I used this one. It's a little safer to use, and did that as a top coat for working on the doll next. Now, her bright hair scalp red doesn't really work for what we're doing, so I am using a acrylic paint using white and yellow to making this kind of pale yellow color to cover all the base head. Now a lot of people do rerooting hair or full removable wig, but my doll won't be removing her hair, and this just seemed like an easier approach for me for my first time customizing a doll. I use Mod Podge to seal the air clay from the ears to the base doll as well as her hips. This is just making sure the air clay won't crumble off in the future. I also put a little bit of masking tape over her blue eyes. As you can see, they're very muted, just to make sure her eyes are protected while I'm working on her. Now, using a combination of yellow and red and blue, and white, I made her skin tone color in acrylic paint and put that off to the side. Now we're using a real wig here. I wore it for a Chobits cosplay, also back in 2004. It's been a well-loved wig. It's very long. It's to my ankles, so we'll be using the wefting from this human wig. I could have bought wefts, but I wanted to use something I already have, and this seemed like a good opportunity to upcycle something that I don't use anymore. So I am cutting the wefting and then also seam ripping it from the webbing, the scalp webbing that comes with each wig. I ended up using like half of this wig to make Galadriel's hair. They come off in these like strands, I wouldn't say strands, like streams of hair on what they call it wefting, and I'm just using the segments that come off the wig and then putting it on this piece of cardboard with some masking tape just to get it out of the way, because I will be washing the hair later to kind of re-straighten it. I'm just lightly going through with some scissors and again seam ripping and cutting from the original wig head. Now this is an older wig, so there is some hair wefts that are actually the length of the wig, and there's some that are like in between, like shorter hair, just because it was a cheaper cost to make the wig back then. It is a 2004 wig, so it's an older wig, not quality wigs as you get now. So, yeah. This was a very hard process. All that hair was a lot to work with. It reminds me of my days when I worked on my Rapunzel wig back when I did kids parties. So now that hair is all twined on there, I'm going to use my hot water kettle to re-steam the hair to reset it. And I did trim the hair a little bit because, like I said, this wig went all the way to my ankles or whatever it was. And she doesn't have nearly as much length to work with. She's a doll, so she's small. So we'll be making our own pattern. And aside from making my own Calico Critters Fable paper pattern for my doll, then I have never made a Barbie style kind of outfit, a doll outfit for, this is what it is, right? So I'm using a piece of paper to kind of do a flat mock-up of what her shape looks like on a piece of paper. So I'm using the straight line to figure out the middle of her body, and now I'm figuring out her neckline. Going back and forth, making some trimming here with some scissors, and using a pen to mark where the shoulder seam would be, where her armpit seam would be, and making some alterations with scrap paper and masking tape. And that will be where her top shoulder seam will be. Now, the bottom of her dress, in my opinion, the specific dress I'm inspired by is kind of like a mermaid, mermaid, A-line mermaid, somewhere in there type of dress. I'm going to do a method called the slash and spread method. I'm marking these so that if the paper just rips off, then I know who goes where. So I'm trimming the paper all the way up really close to the edge here where I separated it from the original dress paper pattern, and I'm spreading them equally apart to create more weight and flow on the bottom of the dress. Making some alterations with some paper and some pen marks here. I am using the slash and spread method to make the final pattern for the front of the dress. Be sure to mark all your patterns. Now we'll be doing the back side of the dress. Same thing, I traced her. Now I'm going to use the front as a reference because I know it might be close but not identical because there's a chest in the front and not the back. So checking the side seam here, seeing how those line up. I thought I would have to do huge alterations, but really from the front to back, it was really the shoulder seam and the underarm seam was the only real change from the front to back pattern. The collar line did move up a little bit, so I don't want the dress to slip off of her. All right, now the back of the dress, same thing. We're making a cut here to make an incision to do the slash and spread method. Now I'm using the front pattern as a reference, but the back dress will be a train, so I wanted to lay a little longer, but more of a dramatic effect because she is an elven goddess. She needed more drama. So here's the back seam. I did tape the shoulder seam just to see how it would line up. So this is a mock-up, so the final pattern is going to change a little bit just to meet the needs of the fabric that I had. I'm using some measurements here to figure out how long I want the sleeve to be. Now, if you ever made a D&D or Renaissance medieval outfit, you will hear people say time and time again the tunic dress is a staple in the community for costumers. This is very similar, if not identical, to how you would make one in human full adult size. So I'm kind of just generally trying to figure out the shape, which is kind of this dramatic triangle that's going to lay over the top side of her arm and have this underseam. And again, like you would make a tunic in real life, typically the only seam line you would have is underneath her arm all the way to the ground. Now I wanted her arms to peek out because she wears a really pretty ring from the Rings of Power if you've seen the show, and she wears it in Lord of the Rings as well, but it's her ring that has a lot of magic in it. So I wanted to show off the ring, so I wanted to peekaboo her hand a little bit better. Now the sleeves were looking really good, but I did want to have more of an underhang. So I'm adding some more paper here to make some alterations to the sleeve. Now this kind of becomes purposeless when you see me do this, but I'm tracing the front and back onto this piece of paper as if it was a full piece of fabric. I'm doing this just to see if there's anything I need to change or alter before I make the final decision go directly to fabric. You can see flip it here, as I made only one side, it's mirrored on both sides, just to see how it would look. trying it on her, and it looks really good. Now, the fabric, we have 3 different fabrics. They're gorgeous. The materials for all her costumes are really ornate. This fabric here was actually, I harvested from a previous product that I made for Ren Fair. I made these little punts for my Ren Fair costume. They're very beautiful. I am also going to be using this fabric in a paneling way, so you'll see me actually had cut the side seam up and adding some seam allowance because I only had X amount of fabric. Now, really utilizing this really gorgeous fabric, I'm trying to figure out where I wanted the front to be, where I wanted to show off. Here's my little Ren Fair outfit. And yeah, so I mirrored that and using a water-soluble pen from Daiso. Water-soluble pen means you can mark something and then use some water on the fabric and it'll disappear. So this helps a lot with white fabric. And I really love this fabric specifically because it's like a muslin, it has line work through, it has stitching, embroidery, and this really tiny tinsel throughout the fabric. It's gorgeous. So these are the 2 back pieces and the front pieces. We're gonna do wrong sides together, and so that top seam that I had made the pattern adjustments for to allot for this fabric that I picked because I only had so much of this fabric. Using a straight seam, stitch all the way down the machine front and back, and a zigzag stitch. And number 4 is just with the zigzag stitches on my machine. We'll be doing this on both sleeves. All right, top seam is done, looking really good. Now we're doing the under seam from the wrist all the way down to the ground. And yeah, I'm doing a straight pin method here because my machine can go over my needles, and this fabric is pretty slippery, so I decided to use a more solid approach and not have it slip in the machine when I'm sewing it. And again, we'll be doing a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch on both sides. Perfect. The back is open. I forgot to film this, but I did close up the back. I only sewed it a straight stitch all the way up to the middle and left most of the back open so I can put it on the doll and hand sew it later. So I used some shears and made tiny little incisions, not up to the stitch line, just so it's easier for me to turn these sleeves inside out or right sides out. And I'm using the help of a chopstick here, going really slow because this fabric is very fragile. I wouldn't say fragile, dainty. I don't want to rip it, so I'm very carefully turning the sleeves inside out. And I did press this as well, so it's a little easier to see it. I did make one alteration here on the hips. It needed to be a little more fitted around the hips. I'm using that water-soluble pen to mark what needs to come in a little bit more on both sides, and again use my pins and a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. That looks great. Moving on to the other fabric. This is pretty see-through, so we do need a lining fabric. Plus the sleeves are going to show the peekaboo of the inside of the sleeve, and I thought this would be really pretty to have this fabric. I did pre-wash all my materials, so everything changed and shifted the way it should before I went to the actual fabric. So I made the same thing with the inside fabric. They're identical, and we're going to put them into each other like this. Perfect. Line them up, and now we're going to do the neck seam. I'm going to turn the very edge into each other and use the needles to mark it as I hand sew whip stitch all the way around the top collar. And tie that off, and perfect. Cut off the excess. We're going to do the same thing with the sleeves, both sides. Just lightly turn an edge in to be able to meet them together, to pin them, and do a whip stitch all the way around those sleeves as well. And I'll be doing the same method to the bottom of the dress as well. Stick around for part 2 as I will be doing final customizations, details, and a final look for my own DIY Galadriel doll. Thank you. See you soon.